Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hello, everyone. Today, my guest is Nikki Rausch, CEO of SalesMaven. And today, we're going to be talking about how to have more strategic sales conversations. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
So, first question I always ask, right? Tell me your story. How did you get to be the CEO of SalesMaven? I presume you are a sales maven.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah. And so tell us how you got here.
How I got here originally started from a college project. I had to interview a company and give a presentation. Like 90% of my grade was all about this huge presentation that we had to do on a local company. The company that I gave the presentation on ended up becoming my first professional sales job. They ended up hiring me. And that's when I kind of fell into this idea of like, ooh, I love the idea of being able to control my income based on having a commission sales job. This was a tech company, and I was in the tech industry for 17 years and had a lot of success there. I was a top producing rep in North America for one of the largest companies in the world, and got to a place where I started looking around going like, is this going to be it for me, or what else is available? Like, I've been doing this for so long. I really wanted to actually progress in the company that I was at. And luckily, the vice president sat me down one day and said, this company is never going to promote you. And I said, well, why? I'm your top producing rep. Like, this makes no sense. And he said, well, you're a woman. And I said, okay, thank you so much for telling me that. And so I got really curious about what else was possible. I left the corporate world after I was in it for a few more years, but ended up leaving and starting my own business in 2013 with this idea of really wanting to spend time around people that I was inspired by, people that were passionate. And I found that I could spend time around women entrepreneurs, and women entrepreneurs, although they are incredibly passionate people about making a difference in the world, a lot of them really struggle to have sales conversations. And that was something that I could bring to the table and teach them how to do. So my business was really born out of wanting to hang out with really cool women making an impact in the world and teaching them how to make money while doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a shame that gender or race or any of those things play a role in whether or not you're going to get promoted.
Yeah. But yet it's good to know if that's the case. I would rather be told than, be beating my head against a, glass ceiling going like, how come I can't get in?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's great that you found another path for success.
Yeah.
That didn't require somebody above you to say you're good enough.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. And I'm ever optimistic that as my girls progress, I have two daughters, and they're both, well, one of them is just about to turn 30. The other is 35. So as they age, that this won't be a problem for them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I do think, there's things that happened in my career that would never happen today, some good, some bad, but being able to look back and go, things have really progressed and changed in many ways. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
for your girls, the future is more hopeful, and probably hopefully if they ever decide to have kids, I don't know if they do, but for their kids, it would be different as well, that people do it's based on, merit and what you bring to the table, and yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about your sales process. Let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about what you do for your clients.
Yes.
What's the framework that you use?
So I teach a 5-step framework to a sales conversation. I call it the selling staircase. I actually wrote my 3rd book around it, and I teach it as a staircase because most people understand that when you're gonna go up a staircase, you go one step at a time. And just like in a sales conversation, you need to understand where are you in the conversation and how do you move yourself and the prospect to the next step in the process. One of the big mistakes that people often make is they try to go right from, like, the first step and hop all the way up to the 5th step and go right to the close.
I do that all the time, but I have long legs.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
most people, you stand at the bottom of the staircase and you say, like, "Hey, hop up to the 5th step," they would look at you like, "That's crazy. I'm gonna bang my shins. I'm not gonna do that." And when people show up in your email or they show up, at a meeting or they show up to, sell you something and they go right in for the close, oftentimes you feel like you've got some whiplash or like somebody just skipped a bunch of steps with you because 'cause you're thinking like, well, first of all, I don't even know why you're selling to me because I don't know who you are. You don't have my permission. Like something's gone awry here. So I teach this 5-step process for sales because people usually understand like, okay, I know what step I'm on and I know what I'm supposed to do next or say next and see what the prospect says or does next so that we can keep this going to where we get to the top step where we actually exchange dollars for services.
Yeah, so you wanna go through those 5 steps for
Sure.
us very
Yeah.
quickly?
So, step 1 is the introduction step, and the objective here is to make a powerful first impression. So, really be thinking about how are you coming across? Do you have permission to initiate conversation with somebody? And what are you saying? How is that going to be perceived by the person that is receiving that message from you? Step 2 is to create curiosity. This is the most missed step in the sales conversation. Most people, if you ask them, "Do you know how to create curiosity when you're talking about your business or your products?" They look at you and go like, "What do you mean curiosity?" But yet, if you're not able to create curiosity, the prospect or the person that's engaging in a conversation with you, they don't know who you are. They don't know what you do. They don't know what you can do for them. So you have to pique their curiosity. Once you do that, oftentimes the next logical step in the conversation is what I call the discovery process. And that's where you're finding out what's going on for this person. Do they have a problem? Do they have a need? And do I have a solution that would meet that problem, solve that need? And if so, do I have permission to put it in front of them? And if the answer is yes to that, then we move to step 4 in the process, which is proposal. That's actually where the selling is happening. That's where you're laying out what the logical next step is for them, making that recommendation. And then step 5 goes very closely with step 4, which is the close. And most people actually step 5 is the second most missed step. Most people kind of hang out on step 4 and they don't actually realize that they're not closing. And if you're not closing, people often aren't making decisions about hiring you or not.
So let's talk a little bit about that. The because, I think, uh, maybe what's a better way to describe the challenge that people have in getting from the 4th step to the 5th step? Because, proposal, I make the proposal, and isn't it obvious that I'm asking for
Yeah.
you to make the decision? I think I'm guessing that that's what the problem is.
Yeah, a lot of times people say things like, "Oh, okay, I'll send a proposal to you next week and then, I'll follow up with you and we can talk about it." But that's not actually closing. So if you have a formal proposal that you're gonna give somebody, you actually should say, I'll send the proposal to you next week. Let's schedule a time to chat through it, like talk through it, answer your questions, and talk about next steps. Then when you get on that call with them, you ask them, have you had a chance to review the proposal? What questions come to mind for you? Answer the questions, and then you actually close. You say, is this something you're ready to move forward with? You have to get those words out of your mouth. Now, if you don't need a formal proposal, which I often don't in my business when people are ready to hire me. So during that conversation, if I'm making a recommendation for them as to how we could work together, I have to close. I have to say, my recommendation for you would be the, SalesMaven Society, which is my group coaching program. Is that something you'd like to get signed up for? I have to actually say the close, and then I have to be quiet and I have to wait and see what the prospect says next. And oftentimes we think, oh, well, if somebody wants to hire me or if they want to buy, they will. But if you actually don't put the decision in front of them in a really simple form of a question, our brains are tired. Our brains are also lazy. This has been proven. And they say that the average adult makes, I don't know if you've heard this before, but they say the average adult makes a certain number of decisions a day. Do you know this stat?
I don't, but
Okay.
I'm guessing it's thousands.
Yeah, yeah. So if you think about how many decisions you make in a day, and you said thousands, and anybody listening, come up with your own number, but they say that the average adult is making like 30,000 decisions in a day. That's a lot of decisions. So if we don't have an easy way to make a decision put in front of us in the form of a yes or no question, oftentimes we won't make the decision because we have a bunch of other decisions to make. And if we don't make the decision and we think like, well, I'll just think about it later, or I'll just put it on my to-do list and I'll come back to it in a couple days, oftentimes we never get back to it because not because we don't need it, not because it wouldn't make a difference in our world, but because we have 30,000 other decisions to make that day. So when you're talking to a prospect, it is really important that you close.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think about it in terms of in those terms. So that's really helpful, Nikki. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you said the first thing that you have to do is to make a positive first impression.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Sometimes that's happening, through your website. That's happening through what you're posting on social media. But when you're actually in a conversation with somebody, it's been proven that people are making a lot of judgments about you. So how are you showing up in the conversation? Are you ready? Are you prepared? Are you on time? Like, are you are you spending time like adjusting your camera if you're doing a video call, or are you spending time like getting your notes together? Because people are making decisions about that. So when you want to earn somebody's business, you want to show up and be prepared and look like, okay, I'm ready for this. I've got things that are going to be a distraction. They're all turned off. Nothing is going to kind of interrupt our conversation. You have my full attention. And then the other thing about a first impression is, and I'll say this because a lot of us now are doing business over video calls, right? Don't ever be afraid to actually introduce yourself, even though, yes, at the bottom of your, at the Zoom or whatever you're on, it's got your name on it, but say your name out loud because it shows that you are trying to make it easy for the other person. So something as simple as like, hi, I'm Nikki. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Because the other thing is it then prompts them to say their name. And especially if they have a name, or if you have a name that can be hard to pronounce, or that maybe has a unique spelling, or there's something about it that could make it hard for people. If somebody's spending their time thinking like, okay, what's this person's name again? Or how do I say their name? They're not totally present in the conversation. They're like up in their head thinking about stuff. So make it easy for people. I always say the easier you make it for people to get to know you, to work with you, the more likely they are to hire you.
Yeah. No, that's really profound. One of my challenges is that people usually mispronounce my last name.
Okay.
It's a common name is Kirch.
Yes.
With an S in it. But my name is not. So that to say, hey, this is Dr. Stephen Kirch, and
Yeah.
people will pick that up and to make it easy for them so they don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and it's embarrassing to say somebody's name wrong, and I would rather somebody tell me how to say their name than try to guess, right? So, and same for you, like in order to improve people's success with you, if you're willing to extend yourself and say your name, then it makes it easier for them to be in conversation with you, which then will make it easier for you to earn their business.
That's great. So you talked about creating curiosity, and I know before we came on, we talked about cat calling versus dog calling. So
Mhm.
I wanted to share a little bit. I'm assuming that the cat calling has to do with the creation of curiosity, but
It does.
yeah, share a little
Yeah.
bit about your theories around the curiosity piece, which is, step two.
Yes. So step 2, creating curiosity. I do often compare creating curiosity to the difference between how you call a dog versus how you call a cat. And I know that sounds a little crazy. So thank you for letting me explain it. But usually, if you hear somebody calling their dog, they change their demeanor, they change their voice. They do these things where they're like, "Come here, boy, come here," right? And you're like
Yep.
excited, and
Yep.
dogs respond to that energy. They're like, "Oh, something fun's gonna go
Oh,
on."
oh,
They don't even
pick
know. They
me,
don't know
pick
if they're
me.
getting a
Yeah.
treat, right? Like maybe we're going for a walk. They don't know, but they're excited. But you can't call a cat like you call a dog because a cat will just look at you like, "I don't think so."
Yes. Are
And
you
a
talking to
lot of
me?
times, yeah,
Did
exactly.
you
And
rub my lamp? Wait, that's a different movie.
that's a different movie. So when you think about when you're showing up in a conversation, if you show up with what I call dog calling energy of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to this person because I know I can help them and they need what I offer," and you have this dog calling energy, people go like, "Oh," they push away. They're like, "Oh, coming on too strong." We don't respond well to that as humans. So I always say the opposite of this, when you want to call a cat, you do this thing where you go, "Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty." And cats don't even always come to that. Sometimes they just give you a look like, "What?" Right? So, when you're showing up in conversation, your job is to pique people's curiosity. Your job is to get them going, "What? What does that mean?" Or "Tell me more about that." So, there's a few ways that I teach to create curiosity, but just the simplest one for people listening is think about how you answer questions, because oftentimes you might have like what I call the dog calling answer, which is word vomiting. Somebody asks you a question and you give them a diatribe answer. They don't want that. They just want enough to be in conversation, enough for them to ask the next question. We just got to like pique that curiosity a little bit. So if somebody were to ask you right now, like, "Hey, what's something exciting going on in your business?" You might have like a really long answer, which could be that dog calling, and then they'll be like, "I'm so sorry I asked." Or you could give enough of an answer for somebody to then ask you a follow-up question. So I usually say your answers to what are the "here kitty kitty" responses are usually 1 to 3 sentences at the most, but 1 to 2 sentences kind of ideal. So maybe you have something really exciting coming up and you might say, "Something exciting going on in my business right now is the podcast is getting really close to hitting its 100th episode." That's all you need to say, because they're going to go, "Oh, you have a podcast? What's your podcast about?" Right? And now they can ask some follow-up question. And now we're in real conversation. Now, the way you direct this is, what is your answer that you give? Your answer should be about something you want to talk about, or something that helps you identify, am I talking to an ideal client or not? Because if you're talking to somebody who would benefit from the system that you have, give an answer around that. So for me, if I'm doing something, I might say, "Well, what's really exciting right now is I'm teaching 8 of my core classes live once a week." And then somebody could go, "Well, what are your core classes? What does that mean? What are you teaching on? Who is that for?" Now we're in real conversation. And what happens when you create curiosity and people start asking follow-up questions is the next logical thing that comes is oftentimes are buying signals from potential clients. So buying signal is a verbal or nonverbal cue that somebody gives that indicates interest. So if I said something about teaching my classes and they go, "Well, what classes are you teaching?" And I give an answer that maybe will pique some more curiosity. I might say, "Well, this week we're talking all about pricing." And they go, "Oh, I could use some help with my pricing." That is a potential buying signal for me. So then I can now follow up with an invitation and say, "Is that something you'd like to attend?" Right? Now we're having a real business conversation about something that is, am I talking to a potential client or not? Or I might say something about pricing and they go, "So did you hear what's going to happen this week in the news?" Like they could totally change the topic, which is fine. I'll go with that conversation. But my job as a business owner is to look for ways to pique people's curiosity.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. The whole thing around trying to draw out what matters to them,
Yeah.
right, within the context of what you do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Because you probably could talk for days about all that you know and all of your experience, right? If somebody asked me, tell me everything you know about sales, Nikki, I'd be like, how long do you have? Because I know a bit, but I want to answer the question that's most interesting to them.
well, you might respond with, well, what I've learned is that there are 5 steps.
And then people could go, what are those steps? Now we're in real conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
So, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So do you have an offer that you'd like to make to the listeners here that could help them explore your system a little bit?
Yes, I have. I would love to gift your audience my ebook that's called Closing the Sale. And in there, I kind of talk through the last couple steps of the selling staircase, give you some language suggestions of how to move people through that. So you can get that. Is it okay if I just say the link out loud?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So you can get that just by going to yoursalesmaven.com/profit minds, all one word, profit minds. And then that will be my gift to you. We'll be connected. And then if you have a question or feedback about something I shared on the podcast or on the show, I'd love to hear from you.
That's great. And otherwise, what's the best way? What's the best way for people to reach out if they want to learn more about your system?
You can definitely visit the website, which is yoursalesmaven.com, or I tend to hang out on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me there.
That's a great place for those of us that do this kind of thing to hang out.
Yeah.
All right. And that concludes our show. Thanks again to my guest, Nikki Rausch, CEO of SalesMaven. I hope you learned something about how to have more strategic sales conversations. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.